The moment that silver coin touched her lap, her entire life changed forever. She was only 14. They called it a blessing. But what happened behind those temple walls in ancient Babylon was so disturbing that historians still debate whether we should even speak about it. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this ritual was deliberately erased from history books, and why the truth is darker than any myth you've ever heard. Picture yourself at 14 years old, wearing the finest clothes your family spent years saving for. Your mother places fresh flowers in your hair, but you can see her hands trembling. Your father stares at you like someone watching an important agreement being finalized. Your brother taps his fingers impatiently, eager to finish uncomfortable business. Everyone around you speaks of blessings and divine favor. They say this day honors the goddess, but nobody explains why the elderly women near the sacred chamber refuse to look you in the eye. Before sunset arrives, a complete stranger will determine your value. And somehow, this is considered the gentle part of what's coming. The temple entrance shimmers like gold under the afternoon sun. The massive ziggurat tower stretches upward like stairs, carved directly into the heavens. As you approach, the air fills with the scent of burning incense, cooked grains, and ritual smoke. Priests glide through the space like phantoms. Workers carry heavy baskets filled with ceremonial offerings. Somewhere deep inside, behind curtains soaked in exotic perfumes, a ceremony awaits your arrival. A priest hands you a woven rope crown. Another records your identity on a clay tablet. On the altar platform, you notice a single silver coin placed there, as if expecting someone specific. Within moments, you'll comprehend why your parents brought you to this place. Within moments, you'll realize why these temple doors can only be locked from within. Within moments, you'll discover this ceremony has absolutely nothing to do with spiritual devotion, and everything to do with possession and control. This isn't folklore or legend. This was the reality of ancient Babylon, a system so deeply embedded in society that historians from that era documented it without hesitation, yet so deeply troubling that modern scholars continue debating whether the full truth is too horrifying to acknowledge. By the time the first stranger approaches the young girl standing in the ziggurat's shadow, you'll grasp the genuine purpose behind Babylon's most revered ceremony, and understand exactly why civilizations attempted to wipe it from collective memory. If the concealed darkness of ancient times captivates your curiosity, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Press that like button. And when you reach the moment that disturbs you most deeply, share in the comments where you're watching from. Let's dive into this forgotten history. Her name is Beltani, and this is where her journey truly unfolds. Imagine yourself as Beltani, standing at the entrance of Ishtar's sacred temple. Other girls surround you, some appearing older, others younger than yourself. Some maintain composed expressions while others look as though they wish to disappear into the decorated floor tiles. An attendant hands you a delicate cord, coiled and soft, woven from plant fibers. A crown for the devoted. The woman explains as they position it around your head like a circlet that constricts rather than adorns. You force a smile because everyone else around you is smiling. You perform exactly what's expected of you. They offer you grain cakes and a cup of sweetened beer. You bow respectfully. You memorize the sacred hymns, your voice barely audible against the collective chanting. The Greek historian Herodotus documented it without sugarcoating, describing women seated with rope crowns pressed against their heads, while men made selections as they walked past. Modern scholars still debate whether he misinterpreted what he witnessed. But the ancient clay tablets don't leave room for argument. They contain detailed lists including names, payments recorded in silver and grain. These records were created specifically for accounting purposes. But here's the reality that no historian will openly acknowledge. This is the precise point where the narrative stops resembling something sacred and begins looking purely transactional. Beltani absorbs the system's mechanics rapidly. First comes the preparation and training. She learns music, dance, the application of perfumes, the subtle art of lowering one's gaze, so it becomes an invitation rather than rejection. A woman named Beltani demonstrates how to apply a cosmetic stone across her face to create a final shine of oil. A young boy with ink-stained fingers marks her identity on a small clay tablet. Kadisu, he whispers, as though that single word functions as both title and trap simultaneously. The temple priests explain the theological framework in patient, measured voices. Pleasing Ishtar means pleasing the entire city. Pleasing the city ensures successful harvests, births, and prosperous trade routes. The reasoning appears logical and tidy. The actual consequences are anything but. If you were standing in Beltani's position, would you label this devotion or imprisonment? It's tempting to classify the Kadisu as priestesses. After all, they receive training. They memorize sacred hymns. They learn to interpret holy texts pressed into clay. They dress in clean linen garments. They exist within consecrated walls. From an external perspective, it resembles elevated status. The legal system supports this perception. The law provides protection on parchment, granting them property rights, wages, and legal standing. But the tablets never document consent, and they never record any possibility of departure. Technically, she belongs to no individual man. In reality, she belongs entirely to the temple institution. For a brief period, Beltani allowed herself to believe this might become her path forward, an opportunity to ascend like the priestesses whose names were permanently inscribed in clay. Perhaps the temple would offer genuine protection. Perhaps she could actually flourish within these walls, but that fragile hope dissolved quickly. The written records only capture part of the reality. What transpires next represents the part that even the official tablets deliberately avoid describing. When night falls and lanterns are ignited across Babylon, settling into a low, humming quietness, the inner courtyard transforms completely. The outer doors draw shut, yet men continue entering, merchants with covered faces, soldiers returning from duty, travelers carrying silver, grain, or cloth from distant territories. They don't linger unnecessarily. They provide payment and priests escort them behind low, hanging curtains where the Kadisu wait in preparation. Coins exchange hands, names get recorded, portions are designated for sacrificial offerings. Everything remaining feeds the temple's storage reserves. This is where spiritual devotion transforms into mechanical routine. Beltani observes an older woman exiting the enclosed area. She moves with practiced care, a coin resting in her lap, and her gaze trained to avoid settling anywhere too long. Nobody shames her publicly. Nobody mocks her situation. The city respects her for having fulfilled her service. And yet her life path has already narrowed significantly. She won't marry in the traditional manner. She won't raise children within a household that belongs to her. Her future has been quietly shaped without a single spoken sentence of her own input. Some Kadisu refer to this as holding a position of importance. Others call it pure survival. Beltani calls it the established order. Her days aren't chosen by her own will, they're assigned by others. Bells wake her each morning, rations determine her meals, names spoken by priests decide when she must serve. Nobody physically threatens her. Nobody places her in restraints. Still, absolutely nothing belongs to her, not even her time. A woman who cannot leave is not staying through choice, no matter what official language is used. During nights, lying on her narrow sleeping mat, Beltani thinks about the smell of wet barley, her mother's hands smoothing through her hair, the rope crown still resting lightly against her temples. She wonders how long perfume can successfully hide complete exhaustion. The tablets provide no answers to such questions. They simply cease recording certain names altogether. Then there exists another ceremony entirely. Once annually during the New Year festival, the temple prepares what they call a sacred marriage, intended to secure the city's continued prosperity. It's dressed up in hymns and symbolic language, spoken of as divine union and blessing. Inside these walls, it feels significantly less like celebration and much more like evidence. Evidence that the goddess's favor has been purchased once again for another year. The temple structure accepts no refusals. Beltani remains new enough to hold on to belief that the goddess might demonstrate gentleness. The hymns speak beautifully of gardens and rain, of love that nourishes the earth. But the priests speak strictly of service and obligation, while the men speak only of payment. The underlying purpose is never actually hidden from view. The city must be sustained. The city must continue surviving. As twilight settles across the sky, Beltani lifts the rope crown once more. The inner courtyard doors close firmly. Rugs are carefully laid out. Records are straightened and organized. Girls adjust their hair while chants rise through the air, ancient and insistent. Something shifts behind a curtain. The atmosphere tightens noticeably. One more name will be taken. One more entry will be added to the records. One more night will be absorbed into memory. A priest murmurs words she can barely distinguish. Incense floods her lungs. A coin waits somewhere just beyond her sight. A narrow rope path marks the ground, indicating precisely where she must sit and wait. A man will make his choice. When the curtain trembles slightly, Beltani comprehends that the choice was actually decided long before she ever arrived at this place. The fabric parts gradually. It falls shut behind the stranger who enters. The rope crown digs into her palms as she grips it tightly, suddenly fully aware of its true meaning. The priests label it sacred. The older Kadisu understand better. Once it touches your hair, the temple claims far more of you than your family ever could. Footsteps cross the tiled floor. Sandals scrape against clay. The man isn't cruel in nature. He's ordinary, simply following a custom older than both of them combined. He hesitates briefly, then the silver falls. It lands in Beltani's lap with a sound far too small for what it permanently seals. The priest exhales audibly. The scribe presses a mark into soft clay. The coin doesn't need to be large in size. It only needs to be given. And because it was given, it cannot be refused under any circumstances. Tradition dictates she must rise. And within these walls, tradition functions as absolute law. This moment isn't the conclusion. It's merely the entry point. Once the coin has fallen, nothing requires further explanation. The priest gestures forward. The stranger walks ahead. Beltani's knees shake involuntarily, but her feet obey the unspoken command. The path has already been decided for her. The ritual chamber is narrow, its painted walls glowing softly under flickering lamplight. Incense hangs thick throughout the air, sweet yet suffocating simultaneously. Small bells fixed to the doorway chime as she crosses the threshold, supposedly meant to summon the goddess, but sounding instead like a signal that another obligation has officially begun. Nobody speaks to her directly. Nobody explains what comes next. The silence is entirely deliberate. This system doesn't rely on cruelty for its function. It relies on age, endless repetition, and the complete confidence that nobody will interrupt what has always been done this way. The ritual is older than the city's walls themselves. It doesn't pause for doubt. It doesn't adjust for fear. Beltani steps inside. The curtain falls behind her and Babylon continues without acknowledging her absence. In the months that follow, temple life settles into a rhythm that leaves absolutely no room for questions. Morning hymns, oil baths, lessons in music, scent application, and maintaining composure. Inside these walls, the Kadisu are praised as sacred servants. Outside, they're spoken of in considerably lower voices. They move between reverence and utilization without ever fully belonging to either world completely. Some of the older women whisper when the priests have departed. Ishtar owns us, one mutters quietly, another shakes her head, the temple does, Ishtar only signs off on it. Beltani doesn't laugh, the temple functions as a city within the city itself, storage rooms stacked impossibly high with grain, jars sealed with silver, names pressed into clay and filed away systematically. And the Kadisu move through it all as essential, yet as unnoticed as the machinery itself. The legal system recognizes them officially. It grants certain privileges. It lists specific protections. It does not grant departure. One particular night, Beltani, the woman who initially trained her, sits beside Beltani on the terrace, with moonlight flattening the world into pale shapes. "You understand it now," Beltani says quietly, "how this place actually works." Beltani nods slowly. "Do you still think we are priestesses?" Beltani hesitates before responding. "What else would we be?" Beltani smiles, but it's a tired expression worn completely smooth by years of answers that lead absolutely nowhere. "Necessary," she states, "necessary to the temple, necessary to men who come here and leave lighter, necessary enough to keep, never enough to release." A voice calls from below. Another offering has arrived. The rope crown waits on its designated hook. Duty resumes immediately. As seasons turn and cycle, the temple becomes familiar in ways Beltani never wanted. She recognizes different footsteps by sound alone. She knows which merchants bring wine, which soldiers bring impatience, which offerings carry the sharp smell of foreign roads. She knows the specific sound of coins striking clay bowls, and how quickly each one is counted, sealed, and stored away. An accountant once tells her she brings good fortune. She looks past him at the overflowing storage rooms and understands what that praise truly means. What weighs on her most heavily isn't the ritual itself, which becomes numbing in its endless repetition, but rather the hours afterward. When the incense thins out, the chants fade away, and the city's noise returns beyond the walls. That is when the temple feels smallest. That is when the future completely disappears. Nobody here speaks of later years. Names are recorded systematically, then one day they are not. Older women vanish quietly, their mats are folded up, their spaces filled immediately. When Beltani asks where they go, Beltani touches her hair gently and says, "To the goddess." Her eyes do not agree with her words. It's near harvest season when a new marking appears on the temple calendar. The sacred marriage approaches, a ritual meant to bind the land's prosperity to divine favor. The public will witness hymns, flowers, and processions. Inside the temple, preparations are made with careful precision. The Kadisu do not perform the actual rite. They prepare it, and for the first time, Beltani's name is called for this purpose. A bowl of scented oil is placed in her hands. Her hair is arranged carefully, the rope crown is adjusted, the air in the room feels heavier, as if the walls themselves are listening. Even Beltani watches without speaking a word. "What must I do?" Beltani asks. The priest answers calmly without urgency or threat in his voice. "What the goddess requires." The inner chamber is dim, illuminated by only a few lamps. Stone lions stare from the walls with eternal gazes. A platform stands at the center, draped in cloth, reserved for the highest rites of state and faith. Beltani's breath tightens. She has learned enough to recognize danger, even when it wears sacred language. Footsteps echo beyond the doorway. Someone important is approaching. And in that moment, Beltani understands that whatever lies beyond the next curtain will shape the rest of her life. Not through violence, but through permanence. The chant begins, the lamps burn lower, the curtain stirs, and Beltani steps forward. She has prepared lamps before. She has prepared rooms. Tonight she is the one being prepared. The high priestess stands at the center of the chamber, draped in white linen edged with gold. She looks less like a woman than a living symbol, composed, elevated, distant. Only the faint tremor in her hands betrays the truth. Even she feels the weight of this night. The altar is carved with lions, Ishtar's beasts, their stone jaws forever open. She tips the bowl. Oil spreads across the surface, dark and reflective, catching the lamplight like a held breath. Footsteps approach behind her, slow, deliberate. The man chosen to stand in for the divine enters the chamber. King or noble, it no longer matters. His presence shifts the entire room. Beltani keeps her eyes lowered just as she was taught, but she feels his gaze settle like physical weight on her skin. The priests circle them. The chant deepens, the chamber seems to close in, walls pressing closer than before. Then a voice speaks, calm, certain, final. Tonight you serve the goddess in body and in symbol. The land depends on this. The city depends on this. A sentence so ancient it sounds unquestionable. A sentence that leaves absolutely no room for refusal. Beltani lowers her eyes and the ritual begins. What happens next was never written down officially. The temple did not record details meant to be sealed. Only fragments survive in hymns that speak of a prepared bed and verses praising union and fertility. But everything in Beltani's life shifts after that night. The next morning, the high priestess embraces her, not with warmth, but with approval. Priests nod as they pass by. A scribe adds a mark beside her name on a tablet she cannot read. Even Beltani looks at her differently now, with recognition edged by pity. "You have seen the heart of the temple," Beltani whispers. "And the temple has seen you." No explanation follows, none is needed. Once certain thresholds are crossed, there is no return possible. Then one day, her name is no longer called. There is no dismissal, no ceremony, no farewell. Her entries in the tablets thin gradually, then stop completely. This is how Kadisu disappear from history, not through violence, not through scandal, but through quiet erasure. The records show small notations about duties fulfilled, offerings prepared, festivals served, then nothing. The temple has taken what it required, and it moves on to others. This is how countless lives ended inside Ishtar's walls, not with drama, but with absence. Scholars argue endlessly because argument is safer than reaching a conclusion. The tablets do not argue. They show a system that functions smoothly and efficiently by consuming women without noise or protest. Payments recorded, roles assigned, rituals regulated, bodies folded into law and ledger. Some women entered willingly, others were given by families with no other options available. A few gained status and recognition, most faded without trace. Beltani lived in the middle, shaped by a system that elevated her just enough to make her useful, then swallowed her whole. History does not preserve voices like hers. The temple recorded grain and silver, not fear, not hope, not regret. And yet, the silence around her name speaks clearly. It tells us she was never meant to be remembered, only counted in the records. It tells us why later generations tried to bury these rituals beneath metaphor and denial. Not because they were insignificant, but because they revealed too much about the system itself. The temple is gone now. The ziggurat reduced to dust, the chants silenced forever, the lions broken beneath sand, but the questions remain. What did Beltani believe in the end? Did she still trust the goddess? Did she hope for escape? Or did she learn to stop hoping at all? History will never answer these questions. The tablets do not record longing or dreams. They record transactions, and that is how Beltani remains in history. A name briefly pressed into clay. A life consumed by a system that called itself sacred. And a reminder that even the brightest temples can cast the darkest shadows. If you want to honor Beltani and the countless women history only counted but never remembered, leave her name in the comments below and subscribe to my channel for more forgotten stories from the ancient world.